The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Okay, welcome back to the Retro Rangers podcast. I'm your host, George Grimm, and I'm here this evening with my co-host, my longtime friend and Ranger fan, Marc Weissman. And tonight we're going to be talking about first-round playoff matches for the Stanley Cup Playoffs. And we're going to be talking with Wyatt Unger, who is a analytics expert who I had on in November, and he actually taught me everything I now know about analytics. So I can't wait to get into this. All right, guys, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Why don't you tell us something about your background before we get started?
So I'm currently a high school senior. I am going to be attending UCF in the fall. I've been a hockey fan since 2017, really dove into analytics about a year and a half ago. And it was something I picked up really quickly, similar to how quickly I learned analytics in baseball. And I like having, being able to see the game at multiple point of views, and just happy that I can also share the knowledge like what I did in the previous show with George.
Yeah, it was a good show. I enjoyed it. All right, let's get into the playoff matches. Rangers and New Jersey. What do you think about that one?
You want me to go first, George?
Wyatt can go, and then we can comment on what he
Sure, that's fine.
predicts.
So I think as far as the Eastern Conference, this is probably the matchup I'm most looking forward to, and that would I could say that even if I wasn't a Ranger fan. I think it's just a clash of styles here because the two teams play two different systems. And I think the Devils, I do think they match up a little bit better as far as when you compare the systems they play. I saw it in the regular season. And I think that there's going to be, it might not be the prettiest series for the Rangers, similar to their first round against the Penguins last year. They're going to be outplayed, they're going to be outshot, they're going to be outchanced. But, that might not result in an easy Devils win, because in net you have Igor Shesterkin, top 3 goaltender in the league. And it's not only that, he can absolutely save a game. I am far from sold on Wojtek Vanecek being able to win the Devils a playoff series. And so for this reason, I think it's going to propel the Rangers to a win. I think the goaltending is just such a mismatch. And, even though the Rangers have had poor analytics this year, the playoffs are the first time we're really going to see them at full strength. And especially if that Miller-Trouba pairing can keep it together like they did at some points in midseason when the Rangers went on winning streaks, I think the Rangers take this. And it's going to be a very deep series, easily 7 games, if not 6 of the lowest. And I think that's a good thing, because it's going to be very exciting, fast-paced, and you want as many games of that as you can get. But I'll take the Rangers in 7.
Yeah, I think it's going to go 7 games, if not overtime, and I think it's going to be a really a tough series for the Rangers. The Rangers are going to have to come out quick, because New Jersey is going to jump on them right away, and I think the Rangers have the edge in goal with Igor, because they don't have any real experience in goal with Vanecek and Blackwood as far as the playoffs are concerned, and they haven't made the playoffs in a number of years. I think 2018 or 2017 was the last time they made the playoffs. So it's going to be a long series, and it's going to take its toll. I just hope that whoever comes out of it isn't too physically beat up. Marc, what do you think?
Well, I definitely agree with both of you as far as goaltending goes. I think there's a big advantage with Igor in net, not just ability, but with what he went through last year.
Right.
So, if they, all things being equal, let's say this was both Vanecek's and Igor's first playoffs, I think it would still be an advantage for Igor. But now on top of that, he had a lot of adversity against Pittsburgh, and he turned it around and just was a rock solid for the rest of the spring. So I think that it's interesting, though. I know there's a lot. It seems like the general consensus, at least on social media, is that we don't match up against the Devils as well, or they have so much speed and all this. I got to be honest. There was a part of me that was thinking it might be easier to play the Devils than Carolina, because even though Carolina's got some injuries to some key players like Svechnikov, they have that ability to just blanket the other team. I mean, we really had a lot more difficulty trying to get our game together, even when we were sort of, doing our thing, versus against New Jersey. Yeah, they're quick and they have a good transition game, and of course, Hughes is an X factor for them. But ultimately, now that we have Tarasenko and Kane, who the Devils have only seen once, with them in the roster,
right.
I think the idea, like you said, as long as our defense holds up, and the giveaways both on D and by Panarin, making those cross-ice passes, things like that. If those are kept to a minimum, and it seems like he's really dialed in right now, then I like our talent combined with the experience. The Devils have no experience getting in the playoffs. Maybe in the early games they'll have. They'll feel comfortable, but as it gets down to like a game 4, 5, and 6, and they feel the pressure at home, if they have to win a game at home, or then they come to MSG and it's, going crazy in MSG and they're dealing with that. You can just ask the kid line guys, having experienced that, it's just a total level of intensity, and I think Schneider even touched on it last night between periods that, it's just the level, the biggest takeaway he had was the difference in intensity between the regular season and playoffs. So I think what happened in the regular season is really going to be, has a minimal consequence to what happens in the series.
Right. Good points. What about the fact that the Rangers were 1-2-1 against New Jersey during the regular season?
I don't like he said. I don't think there's much value in that. Right, at least the record. I think you could see. You can look at how the games went. Were the shots favored in one way? Was one team just creating a bunch of chances? And I really don't think that was really seen. The Rangers. They don't get a lot of shots on net, but what I have looked into is that if you look at how their expected goals per shot, they rank third in the league in that. So while they're not getting a lot of overall chances and quantity, they're getting a ton of quality chances, and it's because similar to the Devils, they have a great transition game. But I completely agree with the point that was made. The Devils, they might feel really comfortable, fully rested in their arena for the first couple games, but the Rangers are really going to wear them down because the kid line gets very physical, the fourth line is physical, and then even guys like Kreider and Trocheck, those are sort of in-your-face type of players that are kind of made for this, whereas the Devils team, really isn't. And again, that experience, the Rangers are a young team too, even with their additions, but they're a young team with experience. So it's just, there's small difference makers like that, which I'm not always the biggest fan of turning to them, but in a series as even as this, they are going to play a part.
Yeah, that's a really good point you make about Trocheck, because he wasn't on the team last year, and we faced him, so it was sort of like a big 180 to get him. And the other factor, even at the Rock, there's obviously a huge number of Ranger fans, even if they try to limit tickets, which I understand they're trying to do. But it's still going to be not like if the Devils were playing some other team that wasn't local. So there's that sort of advantage. And, all of these games, we had the one game that we won, and then the other games were, one-goal games. Essentially, one was a 2-goal game, but the last one was an empty net. So effectively, you've got 3 one-goal games and then a victory. And being, I realize you're in high school, but a lot of my analysis always dates back to what happened in '94, and I'm sure you've read about the fact that the Rangers actually swept the season series from the Devils in '94, 6-0, and obviously that meant very little because the series went 7 games, 3 double overtimes. it certainly didn't look like a dominant series the way if you had based it on the regular season. And I don't think much hasn't changed in the fact that the playoffs are a different animal, now or then or really any time. So I think that's where guys like Kane and Tarasenko and Goudreau all have cup experience. I think those are the guys when it gets tough and it's late in the game and we need a goal or we need to shut down the Devils and maintain a 1-goal lead. To me, I look to those guys, to really provide a lot of experience.
I hope you're right. All right, let's do Islanders and Carolina. Now, let me just say, I expect there to be an upset either with the Carolina or with Boston. I think one of those two teams is going to go down in the first round. I think Boston might think that they might be overconfident playing against Florida, and Carolina might have the same problem. But that's just my opinion. So, what do you think? The Islanders and Carolina.
I think that this isn't your typical 2 versus 7 matchup because most matchups obviously are won by the 2 seed. But I think that the Islanders really lucked out by getting the top wild card spot because if they were facing Boston, then you have even goaltending and then Boston just wipes them with the skaters. But with Carolina, with such a goalie disadvantage, I mean, we think Shesterkin and Vanacek is a disadvantage. How about Sorokin and Anderson? I think that with Barzal being confirmed back for Game 1, not only does that help because you have, Matt Barzal, but Bo Horvat had 12 points in 7 games when playing with Barzal. Barzal goes down, Horvat becomes a ghost. So that's another layer to it. Another thing that I visibly saw is the Islanders' power play without Barzal. They don't have that guy, just beaming down the ice, laying drop passes to an open guy to enter the zone and then start, setting up. That's something that really costs them. The fact that their second line becomes a lot better, not having to put Nelson up there, I think that this is a series where, the Canes, again, they focus on quantity over quality. They're going to take a lot of shots from the point. The shots in just about every game this series, it wouldn't surprise me if the Canes had double, but I think overall the Islanders are just going to be able to fight off a lot of those shots with Sorokin, and they're going to create a lot of chances. I mean, Freddie Anderson, I saw the stat earlier, in 35% of games this year, he had under 20 saves, which, we as Ranger fans, we know how good the Carolina defense is. You can't be that bad. And for that reason, I think the Islanders would really, really have a good shot here, and more probably at least double the chance that a typical 7 versus 2 seed would have. And I think my official prediction, I might still take Carolina, but this is going to be a slow-paced series between the Canes' forecheck and the Islanders, the type of game they play. So it might not be pleasing to most fans, but I think I certainly find interest in it because there's always going to be interest when such an upset has such a high probability, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you on kind of the way that the teams match up. When I was talking before about how I think the Rangers in some ways had more difficulty playing Carolina than New Jersey, because the Islanders, it's not apples and oranges with the Islanders and Carolina. I think their styles are closer. So it's almost like either team can be beat at their own game. And then if you think about Sorokin, I think the advantage in net is with them. So just from that point of view, if you kind of make the defenses and the offenses a wash and say, okay, what's the difference in net? I could definitely see an Islander upset. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Like you said, I don't know how interesting it's going to be to watch, but it's definitely it's probably one of the more likely upsets if there is to be an upset.
What about the Bruins in Florida? The Bruins had the best season, in the league this year, but and then playing Florida, who just got in through the wild card. So you would say the Bruins should be heavily favored, but who knows, right?
Yeah, I think to just say the Bruins are going to sweep is a pretty, boring take, and I don't think it's going to happen. I think they'll still win because, for a reason I'll get into in a second, but I think the series is at least pushed to 6 games. Panthers are really a team that are better than their record shows, and that's not a thing you could say about a lot of teams who either made the wild card or missed the playoffs. They create, they're like the Canes where you'll see a lot of point shots, but they can create a lot of high danger chances and make it really uncomfortable for some goaltenders and defensemen. And I think that really they would have been, they only finished 6 points off of Tampa. There was a real chance they could have been in the top 3 in the Atlantic had they had, steady goaltending the beginning of the year. And whether you go with the miracle run of Alex Lyon or, the proven Sergei Bobrovsky, who has pulled off an upset over a record-setting team before with Columbus against Tampa, they're really going to give the Bruins a run for their money. But the Bruins, the experience is probably going to set them apart, aside from the fact that their depth is just incredible. Taylor Hall, Tyler Bertuzzi, and Charlie Coyle is likely to be their third line, and those are top 6 players on a lot of teams. Maybe not other top teams in the league, but for most teams, I think those guys make the top 6 in the first power play unit. So it just goes to show how stacked they are and how committed their GM was to winning this year, which you have to respect considering Krejci and Bergeron are probably done. But I think it's just going to be too much of an overload because Florida still has a question mark in net, and Linus Ullmark's going to win the Vezina this year. So I'll take the Bruins, but again, I am seeing that not too many people think the Bruins are just running away with this. They're giving Florida a lot of credit, which I like because I think they deserve that credit, and they're better than a 92-point team.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say first thing I think of is, two thoughts. The Bruins are definitely going to win this series, and then my next thought is exactly what you said. Look what happened with Tampa and Columbus. I think that's the recency of that series is in everybody's mind, and I'm sure it's in the Bruins' mind as well, that there's no guarantees, doesn't matter, and it's like the epitome of, we set all kinds of records in the regular season, and, which puts some added pressure on the Bruins to some degree. It's almost like if they have a tough time at any point, it's like, well, hey, we're not supposed to have a tough time with this team. And that may be how Tampa ended up losing to Columbus, because you all of a sudden start second-guessing yourself, maybe because of the expectations going into the series.
Right.
But you know what I mean? But still, when you look at it sort of on paper and also how they played, and Bergeron and Marchand and Ullmark and net, they're so deep up front and on defense, the Bruins, that it's hard to not, I can't imagine anybody picking Florida to win, but you just look at it like, there's no guarantees in life. So you don't want to be like, oh yeah, of course, they're definitely going to win. So, but I got to say, it would be shocking, just like it was for the Bolts for them to lose.
You still have to go out there and play the game, whether you're favorite or not. You still got to go out and do what you got to do. You got to score goals and got to keep them out. So, Toronto and Tampa Bay, that seems to be an interesting series.
I think that the Tampa Bay Lightning at this stage are the most underrated team in the NHL because, they lost Ryan McDonough and Andre Palat. And that's really, to me, based on how good they were, I think that was manageable. And for some reason, a lot of teams and it's probably because of the emergence of teams like the Devils and then the Bruins being so good. But there's just been no talk on Tampa in a while. And for me, I just don't understand that. They went to the Cup last year. They didn't have Braden Point for half the playoffs. Kucherov is healthy, had a full season again, and what do you know? He put up very similar numbers to the season he won MVP. I think it's just a dangerous team. And obviously you have Vasilevsky in net, and he's going to, just elevate the team. You give up a 2-on-1, and it's not an automatic goal.
Right.
Compared to Toronto, where I think, again, what might have helped Tampa last year is the fact that none of the pressure was on them. It sounds crazy. They were back-to-back Cup champions, and none of the pressure was on them in the first round. or the second round because they faced Toronto, who hadn't won a series in 18 years, and then they faced the President's Trophy Panthers. And the same thing is there this year. All the pressure is again on Toronto because, Tampa has just been written off by so many people that it's not like, they're under all the news and the articles and the scrutiny of that. And I mean, I respect Kyle Dubas because, a couple years ago he traded for Nick Foligno, and that's all he did. And now he's really gone hardcore. He brought in O'Reilly, Achari, McCabe, Lafferty, Gustafsson, like his acquisitions. Too long of a list to name them all. But I still think I'm sold on that team. They still don't have much going on in the bottom six, which really separates teams, especially when you look at Tampa, because their bottom six is probably the hardest to play against in a playoff series in the league. And I don't think their defense took as much of a hit as people think because Sergachev broke out, and now he's probably better than McDonough was a year ago. And so I don't think Tampa's losses hold much value, whereas I think Toronto still has those holes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, really, if the Rangers don't win, I hope the Maple Leafs do, just because they're an original six team, and they haven't won since 67, 65, and
67.
It's their turn, but we'll see what happens.
Just an aside, I'm sure you met Pete Stemkowski, George, on occasion. Yeah. And I met him a couple times. In fact, it was a while ago at a Ranger blood drive. And within about 30 seconds of talking to him, the first thing he did was show me he still wears the 67 Leafs Stanley Cup ring. And it looks like, seriously, it looks like a high school ring compared to the big, ones that are given out now.
Sure.
He's got it on. He, talked about Sawchuk and, all the great players he played with. Because we, as Ranger fans, we always think of him, with his triple overtime goal, and he did. But he was a cup winner, in Toronto, and he definitely looks back on that pretty fondly.
Yep. Okay.
But as far as the series go, the wild card for me, Vasilevsky. I'm not really sure what goes on with him, but he seems to be, like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in net sometimes. I mean, even the last time we played them, and you think about the first two games of the series last year.
That's right, yeah.
You know what I mean? Here was a guy who was a two-time cup winner. You would think nothing would rattle him, or, he wouldn't let, and he was just, has these moments where he's just not anywhere near, a goalie like Igor or Olmark or something. You just feel like, oh wow, maybe time is catching up to him or something like that. And then he'll turn around and just make these insane saves. So it's not like he isn't capable of playing at an elite level anymore. But I just that to me that's like an Achilles heel where I think a smart team could take advantage of. Whether it be in the first round, Toronto, or if they get past Toronto, the next team, things like that.
I mean, since the first round exit to Columbus, he's posted a .927 save percentage, a .937 en route to winning the Conn Smythe, and then a .922. So I don't think Vasilevsky is in question, and rather I think he is actually the one security Tampa has. If they're off their game, he'll keep them in it. Everyone just over the years, everyone assumed that just because Tampa was a top team, they had a top defense, and that had sort of made Vasilevsky. But really, he stopped a lot. He has dealt, and especially this year, I've seen it more than ever. Like, they'll have Tampa, the team themselves will have off nights, and then he'll post like 35 save shutouts. And so, he does seem to have, those games, like you said, where he'll post an 800 about 5 times a year. But I think you gotta, I think like most things in the regular season, you gotta just throw it out. And I wouldn't say, I think he's thrown it out, definitely, especially when it comes time for the playoffs, the real thing that matters for them. But yeah, I think if it wasn't obvious enough from my comments, I think Tampa will take the series.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree they will, and I didn't realize the numbers he was putting up, save percentage wise. It doesn't surprise me, but at the same time, I guess I have this level of, how does he let certain goals in? That's all. It just stands out to me because
Right.
I think of him like, you know, the top goalie in the world or top 2 or 3 goalies in the world. And then, so that's all. I mean, but you're right. Those obviously, based on the numbers you just said, are small in comparison to, you know, the reality overall.
Okay. All right. How about the Western Division, Wyatt? Are there any which of those 4 series is more compelling to you?
I think
I don't have a go yet, but
yeah, I would, you know, anything can happen, but I would say Colorado probably wins tonight and gets the first round matchup against the Kraken, which would leave the Wild and the Stars. But as far as the best matchup, I'm not even looking towards the Central. I think that it's the Oilers and the Kings, without a doubt. They faced off last year. It went to 7, and the Kings, you know, they had no expectations. They were missing Drew Doughty, Gabe Vilardi, Victor Arvidsson. They've had players take leaps from that point on, like Kempe, Byfield, Mikey Anderson. They've also added guys like Fiala and Gavrikov. They're a much better team, but at the same time, and this is what's going to make it such an amazing series, so are the Oilers. Now, they added Matthias Ekholm, and they won 14 of their last 15 to end the season, with that only loss not even being in regulation. They've added bottom 6 pieces like Klim Kostin and Nick Bjugstad, and Stuart Skinner is the best goalie that they have had in a long time. And, you know, while those acquisitions might not seem at name value, you know, as significant as the Kings, they were also dealing from a better team, and they fixed the same holes that the Kings did. You know, they fixed each team fixed their biggest holes. So I think it's just going to be an amazing matchup because the Kings, they run that 1-3-1 neutral zone trap, and that works against high-speed teams. It was proven. I mean, they didn't exactly shut down McDavid last year. Nobody did, but they slowed down that team, and that's a big reason why they took them to 7 with an inferior team. So I think it sucks for the Kings, though, having to face the Oilers in the first round, because I like the Kings. I kind of put aside 2014. I just hate to think about that, but I still do like their team makeup. I like a lot of the players that they have now. So I think it just sucks for them because I think they're the second best team in the West, but their first round matchup, the Oilers happen to be, in my opinion, the best team in the West. So I think Edmonton will take this series, and I can't wait to watch what I hope is 7 games, because I think all NHL fans deserve 7 games of this.
Okay. Who do you think is the best play? Who's the best player in the playoffs? Who's going to end up being the surprise, the best player in the playoffs?
So for surprise, as in like, I would have to give that one some thought, but I think if Tampa were to make a run, like I suspect they'll make a run, I think Kucherov, Point, and Stamkos will do their job, but like always, there's going to be one of their middle 6 pieces that just steps up, and I would put Brandon Hagel in that conversation. I think with the Kings' amazing depth, although I have them losing in the first round in 7, if they were to make a run, they have tons of depth. You can literally pick anyone out of their top 9 who will give you a great playoff run. I think maybe someone from Vegas, because they're a pretty deep team. So I think you just have to look to teams with depth. So I'd throw out Brandon Hagel, Gabe Vilardi from the Kings. And I guess if the Canes do make a run, obviously someone's going to have to step up considering their injuries. So I'd love to see Jesperi Kotkaniemi have a great playoff run and sort of just, shut everyone up, because he's obviously been under a lot of scrutiny, underperforming since being offer sheeted. So I think that'd be nice to see.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Vegas, because I was thinking of them when you were talking about the West. And, Eichel, I believe this is his first playoff, for him.
Yep,
and,
his first.
Right, and Fleury is an experienced guy. He's older now, but, he's got cup-winning experience. And Marchessault actually went out to a game in Vegas earlier this year against Seattle. Actually, I happened to be out there. And they could surprise, like as a team. I don't know if anybody in particular on that team, like you were asking, George, but as a team, I could see them surprising. And I guess the other thing, last night Sam mentioned on the broadcast that Landeskog is out. I mean, he got hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just been lingering for him. They expected him back at the playoffs, and that was very unfortunate for them because they didn't make any moves because they wanted to stay under the cap, assuming they would activate Landeskog, and then he ends up being out for the playoffs. So they're just going to have to go in with what they have.
Yeah, that's different. And I mean, they have Georgiev as their number one goalie, versus Kemper last year. So that's different. Not saying you can't help, carry them far, but it's just an unknown really. So it'll be interesting, definitely.
All right, who do you think is going to be the surprise team of the playoffs?
I think, I guess, I don't know how much of a surprise it is. They went to 3 straight cups and won 2, but I think based on where people are ranking them, I think I've seen them, I've seen people say the Bruins, the Canes, the Devils, Rangers, and Leafs are all better. So I think you can say the Lightning will be a surprise team because I personally think that they have what it takes, like they always have had, like they have what it takes to go to the Cup. And I think, when the NHL Bracket Challenge comes out tomorrow, that's probably what I'm going to fill in, to be honest. But another team I would put in that conversation, I would say, is Vegas. Because if the further they go into the playoffs, the closer Marc Stone is to coming back. And that guy, we saw last year, they put him on LTIR trying to make the playoffs. Couldn't happen. So they put 3 guys on LTIR so they can activate him and be under the cap last year. And they didn't make it, but he really was a difference maker there. He was a difference maker early in the year, just to see him healthy again, killing penalties, just being a full impact player. And, with the team's depth, amazing defensive core, I think, Darcy Kemper won a Stanley Cup, so I don't think that's as big of a question to have Logan Thompson in that. So I'd say Vegas, but the only thing holding me back from that is the fact they would play the Oilers in the second round should they beat the Jets, which I think is probably going to be the shortest series of the entire playoffs.
Okay.
But I'll say Vegas or Tampa.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with you about Vegas, what I was talking about earlier. And honestly, allegiance aside, I think the Rangers are going to surprise some people only because I can't believe how many people think we're going to have that much trouble with the Devils. So just getting past the first round, I don't know. I guess maybe I'm biased or maybe I'm just,
No, I'm also a Ranger fan, so it could be that I'm biased too. But I agree. I don't think it's because analytically it might be a mismatch, but just the way the 2 teams match up with their system, I think that I think the bottom 6 is just going to play such a huge part in that because I've noticed a difference between the top 6 and the bottom 6. So when they're in the defensive zone, and with the Kid line or the Goodrow line out there. If they have a chance to clear the puck, they will get the puck out of the zone, and then they will forecheck. The top line, they are always looking for someone to make a controlled exit into the neutral zone and then create a transition chance, and it's not always there. It's hardly ever there, and so they're backing themselves into their zone. They're taking these long shifts, and not only does it hurt because, are these long shifts going to give the other team a chance, that's also just more time that you're not being able to create something. So I don't think that's going to change. That's just what they're going to stick to. But I think that's just another reason why the bottom 6 is going to be so important, and I'm so glad they brought back Tyler Mott for that reason.
Oh, yeah. And think about it. Goudreau and VC were both at points, probably were in the top 6 when we played the Devils the first 3 times. So, it's a completely different makeup of the roster. They're now slotted where they should be, and we added, more skilled, better guys. It's not really not an indication. If we were like this all year long and we struggled again, that'd be different. But I feel like, the power play is now clicking, which it wasn't probably during some of the games we played against the Devils. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and the penalty killing tops since like January, I think it is.
Yeah.
Stuff. So I think there's all these things that are coming together at the right time and on top of the fact that the team is loaded with veterans as opposed to the Rangers. And yet, despite all this, there's just a lot of people who are just really nervous about it, and it's tough to read.
Well, all that being said, I think most of the people who are nervous about it are long-term Ranger fans because, the Rangers have a way of wrestling defeat out of the jaws of victory quite often. So, these are the New York Rangers. So,
I think that Kakko and Lafreniere will eventually be really good 60 to 70-point second liners, which might be a little bit worse than their original draft projection, but I think at this point I'd take it. But despite this, I don't think they were ready for they had Kakko on the first line to start the year, Lafreniere on the second, and I don't think they were quite ready for that. So just getting Tarasenko and Kane and pushing them back to the to the third line with Hedl, where they were just so much more comfortable and they click. I think that was just so huge for this team. And I understand being nervous. I mean, you could be nervous about any playoff series, but the own Ranger fans just pretty much saying like, "Oh, it's a wash." Like, maybe Drury will build a better team next season. I think that's just kind of pathetic. Not only because it's your own team, but because it's a very short-sighted opinion.
Yeah, you're right, and that's a good point about the kid line because not only are they comfortable and play well together anyway, but by now those guys, not being on the top six, they're going to see the third best checkers from the other team. So it's like, even if you were to put them out against top checkers the way they play now, they do well. But I mean, by the time the third line of the Devils or whoever else is against them, they've already had to deal with the top six, and now, these guys. That's part of the reason why I think they're so successful is because they don't see the top checking forwards on the opposing team.
Well, what they might do, being that it's a third line and they're very physical, they're all like Kakko is a very big guy, and Hedl as well. So, the fact that they're physical and they're good checkers and they're very smart with getting the puck out of the zone, what I would like to see them do is actually put them up against the Devils' first line because they're not going to need the scoring from these guys. And what it does is it gives our first line a matchup against the Devils' third line, which is going to really allow for some high chances there. I mean, that's what Tampa did when they had the Gord, Goodrow, Coleman line during their cup when they went back to back, because now Kucherov and Stamkos are coming out against the other team's third line, and it just created such a mismatch, and it created such a high volume of chances for their top guys.
That's a really good point, and we really, in all these conversations we've had about how teams, we really haven't talked about coaching very much. And, that's a big factor. You know what I mean? It's like a lot of it's happened many times where the more talented team doesn't necessarily come out because the one coach was outcoached by the opposing coach or whatever.
Right.
So I think that's a great point. I mean, it's one of those things where maybe he does it. It doesn't become like the go-to MO of the team, but if he can sense, we're spending too much time in our own zone with the top six, so let's switch it around. And that's an in-game bench coach decision that I think would really help Gallant get the most out of his players.
Yeah. So, what do you think about the Ranger coach? Is he among the top playoff coaches or what?
So, I mean, I think he's probably middle of the pack here. I don't think he should be fired by any means, but I'm not exactly pleased with him because I feel like earlier in the year he messed up on a lot of the line combinations he made. I don't know how much you guys remember, but he would, for the first 25 games of the season, the Rangers lost one game after winning 5. The lines would get changed. That just won you 5 games. So I don't think he's great at making. Well, I like that he makes them, but doesn't necessarily always make the right ones. But last year against Tampa, he made some really questionable, serious decisions. But then again, it's only one playoff run. It wasn't a complete team. It wasn't a team that was supposed to make the conference finals. So I don't think we can truly judge him yet. But as far as where he stacks up against other coaches, I mean, I think Bruce Cassidy of Vegas is a better coach. I think Jay Woodcroft and Todd McClellan from the Oilers and the Kings are better. Jared Bednar is probably a better coach. Dean Evason's probably a better coach. John Cooper, Jim Montgomery, Brindamore. So right there, I mean, that's eight coaches right there, and I'd also probably put Lindy Ruff there. So I'd say I would probably rank him 10th. But, I mean, yeah, we'll see. He's going to put out the same lines that we've seen recently, and I have no problem with that. I would just like to see him make better, in-series adjustments if they're necessary.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point.
As far as changing up lines, I'm an old guy. I grew up in the original six era, and we had lines. We had set lines. You usually build those lines all year, and the players got to know each other. And so this business of changing lines every few games, I'm not a big fan of that. But the game has changed, so if that's what they got to do, that's the name of the game right now.
I think it's a tough thing, really. I mean, there are times when I watch and, the first half of the game, we have 3 shots on goal. And as a coach, I mean, I know that it's easy to sit back and say, for us fans to sit back and say, well, keep the lines together for 3 or 4 games and have them get used to it. But, it's clearly things are not being generated and 2 points are in jeopardy. To me, it's like, why have a coach back there if he's not going to respond and make in-game adjustments? But to your point, if those adjustments are not the right adjustments, well, then obviously that's a problem. But I think he does that very well. I think, for the most part, when Gallant changes lines in the game, basically, to get people going or reward people or maybe even, demote people or whatever, I think in game, but what the thing is then coming back for the next game is the question of, okay, do you go with the lines that you finished with in the prior game, or do you then go back to what you started with to try to still build consistency? That's what I always go back and forth on with him. And the other thing is the power play. I mean, lately, it's been playing pretty well, but I have a real big contention with him using Kane on the first unit over Tarasenko. I just think Kane's is kind of like Panarin on the right side, very similar.
Yeah.
I don't think he used to be like that. I think when he was younger, he shot more, but I feel like now he's become more of a puck handler as opposed to a shooter. And when he sat out those 2 games, and Tarasenko played the power, it was just like night and day. Because Tarasenko, while a good playmaker, has that little bit more shot first mentality that you need in general, let alone on the power play. So that's frustrating to watch.
I think the number one thing that kills the Rangers power play is the fact that they run a 1-3-1 where you've got Kreider in front, Fox to point, Panarin's Zibanejad on the wings, and then they had Trocheck in the bumper slot, and obviously that changed when they got Kane. But I feel like with so many stars, you need to run. Oh no, excuse me, they run an umbrella, but they should be running a 1-3-1 on the power play because you have so many stars. You can probably stack like Kane and Zibanejad on one side next to each other, the same way McDavid and Draisaitl are stacked together on the Oilers power play, which just created the best power play of all time. I think you have the talent there to where I don't think it's utilized the best when you pretty much have 2 plays. Fox he'll very rarely do this. He'll shoot trying to get a deflection. Right. Panarin will set up a one-timer for Zibanejad, or Panarin will just shoot a wrister, which I don't hate that because Panarin is a very good shooter. We don't really see it because he doesn't shoot much, but when he does, he's a very accurate shooter. But I don't think it's the right spot on the power play. So really they have 2 spots. Zibanejad will fake a one-timer, center it to Kreider. Zibanejad will shoot a one-timer, or Fox will shoot it and Kreider will try and tip it. I just think it's poor utilization.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's like when Fox is the only one dead center at the point, then basically even unless Zibanejad's one-timer is spot on, if you think about it, other than that, he's taking a bad angle shot, and that's what I think happens with Kane on the other side. It's not really a high percentage chance to score that way, and then Kreider has to move all the way over instead of just being right in front. Whereas there were times this year when you had normal, what you consider a traditional power play, where you had 2 point men, Brett and Fox were both at the line, and they could kind of give and go, and then either dish it off to either wing or shoot it with Kreider straight, dead on, straight in front. I feel like that gave them more options than kind of the triangle, with the 2 wingers and just Fox top.
Okay, guys, I thank you very much. We have to wrap this up now. Anybody got any final comments?
None from me.
I had one thing I thought of back when we were first talking about Vanacek, and you said something about how he tends to be a little sketchy, and he doesn't see a lot of his shots or things like that. Like the Rangers do a very good job with high quality shots. Like he's the perfect example of the goaltender that you don't want to just pepper him with bad angle shots or low danger shots. You want to pick your shots wisely and don't give him a chance to get into the game. And it seems like, whereas Igor, how many times have we seen Igor, cold come off after the drop of the puck, and he makes this ridiculous save 2 minutes into the game, right? So he's you know what I mean? And I don't see Vanacek as that kind of goalie. So I think that's the other thing for the Rangers is to kind of not only create offense and make plays, but also do so, kind of it's quality over quantity with him. Yeah. And I think that'll go a long way.
I think the fact that Vanacek racked up wins on a very quality defensive team this year kind of made people overrate him. But I mean, the one thing the Rangers did well when they played the Devils this year, it wasn't always pretty, but the one thing they did well, they scored on him because he's not as good of a goalie as the 30 wins suggests.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. Yeah, you're only as good as the team in front of you, and that's been
and they haven't had the best team in front of their goalie recently. So I think they're just comparing it to what they've had, not comparing it to the average goalie. Because if they compared it to the average goalie, it wouldn't be very dissimilar.
Okay. All right, guys, I thank you both very much for coming on tonight. I think it was a wonderful show, and it'll be posted soon. And I thank everyone for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. All right, good night, everybody.
Thank you, George.
All right, good night.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.